on both ways. This line right here shows a truss heading that way, and these are trusses heading this way. Now, there's a truss, double truss, that connects every column on the exterior back to the core. And there are trusses at every low part of the web right here that goes the other way. So, in fact, if you look at this, we take a section right here at section C. Now, these trusses are running out to the exterior wall. Here's the exterior steel. Here's the interior heavy steel. This corrugated metal decking is running towards the exterior, so it doesn't roll up. If you hit it, it acts as a knife blade because it won't buckle up, it won't roll up, because the trusses are actually, the tops of the trusses are poured into the concrete there. The concrete is poured around the tops of the trusses.
So this is built like a brick, you-know-what house.
Oh, you got it. Now we're getting the idea of what this thing's like. And here's the exterior. This is like I call it a cheese grater. You've got and here's the exterior wall, what it looks like. These things are 3'3" center to center.
And that's why the planes evaporated, but 2 magic passports, not 1 but 2, drifted down unhurt and were found that day by the government.
Yeah, in one piece.
Oh, but it flew into an armored cheese grater.
That's exactly right. And so here's the size of the jet. The fuselage of the jet is the inner red circle. The orange circle on the inside is the size of the jet engine. And you can see what trouble it did when it hit this thing. It is just like a cheese grater. Now, going 530 miles an hour, you got to remember that. If it was at landing speed, it probably would not have pierced the outer wall, and they knew that. See, now that we know that nanothermite has been used on this building, now we know that they planned every piece of it. They planned the speed of the jet. They planned everything about it. Because if they had run it slower,
would have dented the building and bounced off.
Correct. And they didn't want that. And now we know, too, that that's why that building 2 fell first, South Tower fell first, is because the firemen had reached the 78th floor. They were going to put it out. They radioed back.
They were saying the fires aren't even here. This is no big. People were standing next to columns, waving. So it wasn't melting their bodies or even hurting them, but giant columns suddenly melted and blew up. The fires had dissipated. Heat had gone down, but you got to get rid of those firefighters. They're about to find the evidence.
Well, yeah, and if the whole object we now know was to get rid of the buildings in the first place, because they had to remove all this asbestos.
Ron, let me ask you this: we may have to go into overdrive, which will then just be on PrisonPlanet.tv and Infowars.com. Okay. How long is this going to take? I may have to skip this break too.
That's fine. I don't.
It's not good for our affiliates.
Let me see. Let's only do this one more sheet.
No. Do you have to go somewhere?
I don't.
Gentlemen, can we do 20 minutes of overdrive? This is. I'm going to go ahead and take the break because we're on XM and a bunch of AM and FMs coming up, and then we'll have 5 more minutes at the stations here. And what I'll do is in a few weeks I'll even re-air this in another hour, so the stations all get to air it. But people will have to go to PrisonPlanet.tv or Infowars.com only on those audio streams and video streams to get the rest of this. So I want you to take your time. Continue.
Okay. Well, this now I'm really beginning to get into exactly how these buildings function. As I've talked about before, we have this 5-story hat truss on the top that can work in tension. But actually, the more I study this building, we don't even need the tension. We don't need the tension carrying hat truss, because right here is how this is summarized. We know that in here because it's a space frame floor with trusses running in both directions, that it cannot collapse. It cannot collapse all the way across the floor just because you've damaged a portion of it. It has to, these are still connected to the outer columns. On the North Tower, these columns were not severed. They go all the way up to the top. Now this pink line, reddish pink line, are spandrel panels that are 54 inches deep of 2-inch steel that is welded to every column. Now all of this is still in place. It's still holding columns. It's still holding floors. And the reason why that these are now acting as long span beams over to both columns, which has about probably 15 columns on each side of this. So all of this, what is happening is all of this damage is getting compartmentalized. It's not spreading anywhere, even the collapsing floors. This building is just not designed.
Well, the designer said it's made of a plane hits it. It's like a mosquito going into a net. It just catches it.
Well, let me even, it's worse than that. And I've heard people say it's like poking a pencil through a screen. Wrong analogy altogether, because a screen, we all know, a door screen is not structural. And it is, and the structure of a screen is the frame of the door. And you can put your hand through it if you drive it hard enough. But that's not what this building is. This is more like a grate. It's like a very powerful steel grate. And whatever hits that thing is going to be shredded. It's going to be shredded.
Well, then you get their lies about the fires melting steel or even weakening it. Everybody knows at your barbecue pit, it doesn't weaken or melt. I mean, and those are fires, 500, 600, 1,000 degrees hotter. Yeah. I mean, this was a pathetically low-level fire. Most of the fuel was dissipated in the big plume on impact as it was oxygenated. Now, we're going to come back to do an abbreviated 5 minutes on this as the main show ends, the main transmission. Then we're going to do 20 minutes of uninterrupted transmission, one place, Infowars.com. Architect engineer Ron Avery is with us this Saturday. He's going to do a long, detailed hour-plus analysis with other top experts at the Doubletree Hotel, I-35, North Austin. It's free. Be there. Call the media. Final segment of the radio transmission. We'll go into internet only, PrisonPlanet.tv viewers, and radio listeners at Infowars.com. And this full show will go out on the podcast for everybody as well if you miss it, because in the retransmission, restream, it'll only be live. It won't re-air. So if people want it, go subscribe to the free podcast at Infowars.com, the listen page. Okay, Ron Avery, running through your evidence quickly as a synopsis, then we'll go back over what you rushed over in the next 20. Go ahead.
Okay. The synopsis is that the World Trade Center towers were designed to withstand multiple impacts of 707s. And as I've been studying this building, the Twin Towers, I have noticed things that are not traditional in terms of how the floors and things like that were designed. And now I realize why they were designed that way, because it was to deal with unforeseen events like crashing airplanes.
Well, the Empire State Building and others have been hit by aircraft.
Yes, and come on, they act like these architects weren't thinking that. Any time that you build something that's 1,368 feet high, you have to consider airplane accidents.
Biggest building in the world at the time, and we have the architect, who was Japanese, and the project director, both on record before it happened, bragging about how it could take all these strikes.
Correct. And, of course, this has all been written back in the 1970s when they were proposing and building the building, that all these things were taken into account. And I'd like to even mention that the exterior columns of this high-strength steel, they say, can take 2,000% of the gravity load that it was designed to do. It can take an additional live load of 2,000%. That's an amazing calculation, and that's why these columns are quite able to hold anything that has now been put into tension by severing the columns below it.
Because it can handle 2,000% of its weight.
Correct.
Unbelievably overbuilt.
Yes, correct. That is correct.
In fact, I've read about other new tall buildings. They don't even build them this good. This was the first time they were building mega building like this, so they were really careful.
I think something else is very strange about this when I read the executive summary of the FEMA report on this building. They don't call for any, first of all, the most amazing thing they say is after the planes hit, they're not really sure what was the major event after the collisions and after the fires were burning down, what the event was, they even mentioned there was no earthquake, there was no, windstorm, and that's what they were looking for. They were looking for a major event. And then at the end of the paragraph, they kind of wimped out and said, well, the major event were these fires, that eventually caused some collapsing of floors, that initiated.
But they've since reversed the pancake theory.
Well, here's to my understanding, what happened was that after the UL laboratories did their report, and they found that they actually built a bay of this stuff and then subjected it to the same degrees of fire, and the result was there was some sagging, yes, but there was no trusses that were coming off the wall.
And you're certainly not going to have an explosive ending to the building. Pyrotechnics shooting dust 5 miles and shooting girders 600 feet. We're going to have to end the main broadcast now. We'll be back after 1 minute for Overdrive, only at prisonplanet.tv and the free internet audio streams at Infowars.com and prisonplanet.com. You'll see Mr. Avery and myself and many others this Saturday, Austin, Texas, and at 49 other locations across the country. Architects and engineers, great job, crew.